So I've been following my next guest for a couple of years now on Twitter. I put him in my folder that is on my list. It's called Smart People because he's just really insightful, connected. He's got some really good ideas. And then he created something really cool that I am trying to figure out for myself. Now, I don't know about you, but I have my Evernote folder where I throw my old licenses, my Blue Cross Blue Shield card, maybe an article two I'm trying to keep for my clients and really keep things organized. And I'm failing miserably. We all have this stuff that we need to keep track of. And more, even if you're a sales guy, even if you're an executive in a company, you want to keep your stuff in a place that's accessible so that you can use it. You can either reference it, you can share it with someone, or you can create something. So I'm a writer and a podcaster. So I need to access this information. I also have ADD. So, I wrote the book Only Tens for myself and you. So my next guest is really smart. And I asked him to dumb it down for us. He swims in the world of productivity apps and of interconnectedness between all of them. And I realized that we don't really know a lot about those things. We know Evernote, we know email, and maybe a Dropbox. So Tiago Forte is one of the world's foremost experts on productivity and has taught thousands of people around the world how timeless principles and the latest technology can revolutionize their productivity, creativity, and personal effectiveness. He's worked with organizations such as Genentech, Toyota Motor Corporation, and Inter-American Development Bank, which I've worked with also. He's appeared in a variety of publications, the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Harvard Business Review. So people are taking him seriously. He wrote the book, Building a Second Brain, a proven method to organize your digital life and unlock your creative potential. Tiago, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. I'm happy to be here with you.
I appreciate it. So let's talk, you dumb it down for us of what is a second brain? Why do we need a place where we're not keeping track of all this stuff?
Yeah, so a second brain is really just the collection of apps and other tools that you use to intake information, organize and make sense of it, and then use it to solve problems, create results, create new pieces of writing, whatever it is that you do. It's like the ecosystem of software, all those little icons on your phone or on your computer or on your tablet that are like the tools in your tool belt, almost like a carpenter has, his tool chest. He opens it up, has a screwdriver and hammer, all these things. As knowledge workers, we have apps. So second brain is a way of thinking of all those apps, not just as random things that just don't talk to each other, but as a coherent and kind of centralized system for what we are beginning to call knowledge management.
So let's say I have a Google Drive, email, a calendar, right? And maybe Evernote, and I know how to do that, as I said in the beginning. So where do we start with if I just have that? Where do I start thinking the way you think?
Yeah, so there's a few ways you can approach it. I mean, at the most concrete level, having a second brain can really start with something as simple as organizing each of those apps the same way, right? First of all, people tend to use many different pieces of software already. The average person uses one or two dozen every day. So instead of organizing each and every one of those in a completely different way, using a completely different scheme, completely different principles, just use the same system. And I have a technique for that, which is called para, which we can get into if you want. But it's really organizing across different platforms instead of only organizing in one single silo.
Right. I've watched your video on Para a couple times. So can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, so people ask, well, how can I organize, all these different platforms? There's, my task manager, my to-do list app, I might have a digital notes app, I might have cloud storage, I have my local storage on my computer. And here's kind of the secret. You can't, what people normally tend to do is organize according to subject, right? As if they're like in school or in a library, things like business or marketing or psychology or architecture, these big sort of broad academic subjects. And the reason you don't want to do that is first, you're going to have a million of them, right? You're going to have 100 different of these subjects that you're potentially interested in. But the bigger reason is it's not actually that helpful to know, oh, this file or this note has to do with psychology. What does that tell you? I mean, psychology is a vast expanse of a subject. It's not specific enough. And so my para framework is really a way of organizing personal information that's based on the principle of actionability. This is what matters most as individuals is the four letters of para stand for what are my projects? That's the P. The active, specific things that I'm working on achieving right now. Then the A is for areas of responsibility, which are basically longer term things that don't have like a short term deadline, but I have to keep tracking and being responsible for over time. Resources, which is basically all the other stuff you're learning, keeping track of, you're curious about, interested about. And then finally, archives, which is anything from those previous three categories that is no longer active. Those four categories, believe it or not, can encompass your entire digital world, all information in any format for any purpose in any medium. One system across any number of different platforms that you use.
So I come across an article on psychology that's really good. Now I have to, now what's my decision tree?
Perfect. So you want to go through the letters of para, starting at the first letter and then going down the letters, right? So the first thing I would ask is, so you have this note that you've taken related to psychology, but can you be a little more specific? Is there any currently active project that you could actually use this knowledge in?
No, I just thought it was really cool and I'm going to need it someday.
Perfect. So go to the next letter. Any areas of responsibility? Anything like, I don't know, your relationship with your spouse or your kids or a direct report at work or your finances or your health, anything it
Right.
might be
Nobody,
relevant
nobody
to?
cares. Everybody finds that stuff boring. So yeah, it's just for me. But
So,
someday,
so it's not related to any of your areas.
right? No,
Okay. So then resources is the default third option.
great. So it's not archive because it's not like something that I'm never really. Someday when I want to rummage through the box, I'll go there. It's in resources because I have something in the back of my mind 6 months from now that I might do something with.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could put it directly in archives, but I always think if I'm putting something directly in archives, it's probably no reason to keep it in the first place, right? If it's that irrelevant, why am I even saving this?
Exactly. It goes. It goes. My book is called Only Tens. So basically, my job is to throw out nines and below, right? Only keep tens, right?
Yes,
So it goes with my thinking that if I'm going to put it some way for someday, so maybe I don't need it ever, and if I do need it, it'll come up.
totally.
But let's talk about this article. It's a little bit more important than that. So now I decide it's actually for a project that I'm working on now. So I open that project folder,
Mhm.
and now what do I now where do I go?
Just drop it in there. Just drop
Okay.
it in there. I think of this as the seed. You know how like when you're gardening, you make a hole and then you drop a seed. The seed is nothing. It's pure potential. It's just like the very first starting point of what will eventually become this, hopefully beautiful or very nutritious plant. Um, but I like to just create a new folder or notebook or tag and drop in that note. That's almost like the starting point. It is the first seed of what will eventually become research and project plans and interviews and feedback and all this different stuff.
So in the project folder though, do you now name all your different projects?
Oh, so within the top level project folder in Para, you have an individual folder for each project.
Right.
So there's two levels of hierarchy. There's the big project folder, and then there's one for each project. So you really want to drop it in not just in the big project folder, but in the folder for that one specific project. And to answer your question, within that project folder, no, I don't feel any need to organize it really because this is the funny thing. For any given project, there's not that much information related to it, right? Like for an average project, I maybe have maybe 5 to 10 notes, right?
Hmm.
And a note is just a document with just a small snippet of information. 5 to 10 items, you don't need this complex internal organizational scheme. You can just like look at a list and the sorting criteria I like to use is reverse chronological order, right? So the newest thing at the top and then older things and then the oldest thing at the bottom, which is funny. It's kind of like a pile. If you have a pile on your desk, the oldest thing is at the bottom and the newest thing at the top.
Right.
It's almost just like a digital version of a pile on my desk.
And it's how I have everything organized on my desktop. right?
Yeah.
So because again with the ADD, it's hard to find things, and I'm purposely kind of staying away from your nomenclature and the way you talk about things in your book and on your videos, because I want it to be like real language, so that when we go, because I want to, anybody who's listening, you've got to follow Tiago on YouTube, because this stuff is, you've got to sit down with your notebook. You've got to actually decide what it is you want to accomplish, who you are in this whole thing, and then create it yourself. Once you do that hard work ahead of time, then it's worth it. But right now I'm in the overwhelm stage, and in fact, I had a little thing with myself. Is after I got your book, I'm finally going to build my second brain. Right, I'm going to decide between Notion and Evernote and all that stuff, and then I decided I'm not going to do it until I actually speak with you.
Mm.
That was just my thing. I was gonna wait till we had this conversation, and then I'm gonna actually in earnest, because I failed every time I've done it before. So when you see people fail at this, what are they doing wrong?
Yeah, so my perspective on this is funny. It's like I think even that term, building a second brain, it starts to create a conception, a misconception, which is a second brain is this one mechanical contraption, that they're going to build one time all at once, and then it will be perfect in operation, and they'll sort of like set it at the corner of their desk, and it will just like do like whir and do things on its own. That's really not what it is. It's really a distributed system. It's distributed throughout your entire life. Incorporates, a notepad on your desk, incorporates the little, Apple Notes or Google Keep on your phone, incorporates your email in a web browser. It's a distributed system. And here's the thing, everyone already has one. So like in my perspective, there is not a modern human being that doesn't have a second brain already. Right. It's funny, like the same person who tells me, oh, I failed and I've completely, failed at building a second brain. Meanwhile, right over here, they are every single day tracking information, producing results, solving problems, sending communications. It's like, well, what do you think that is over there? I would say what we're just trying to do is make it better. We're just trying to get that collection of behaviors and tools that it already exists in some form and just make it a little more systematic, a little more intentional so that you can see that you are already doing, I feel like 90% of what is required, right? 90% of the effort you're already putting in. What we're missing is just the last little 10% to make it a little more reliable.
And that was exactly what I was hoping you would say to me, because you're right. I have all these things, and for me, again, with the ADD, it's like I don't have a handle on it. So the question is, so you set up these things. So what are the pieces that you need to in order to just kind of start, so we can start having an inventory of what we already have?
Yeah, so the way I think of it is not in terms of pieces, that comes later. Really think in terms of the human behaviors. I have a framework called Code, which is the main chapters of my book, which are sort of like the four fundamental parts or steps of building a second brain, which is really the creative process. So what I would have you look at is which of these is currently not working well for you, right? Capturing information, basically writing it down, organizing it, adding some structure and order to it, distilling it, boiling it down to the key points, to the
Mm,
essence, or expressing it, sharing it with other people. Which of those strikes you as like, oh, there's some pain there?
finding it,
Okay.
retrieving it. So I think that's the organization part.
Some organization and also some expression. So when we look at, let's start with organization. I mean, this is essentially what we were talking about, para. Like, and this is the way I would do it is how to transition to para. Often people think, oh, I need to get all my files and then very individually sort them into these different, para folders. That's really not what I would suggest. I would suggest getting all of them, dumping them straight into the archives. That's the past. The past is the past. The past is in storage. And then start over by creating a new folder for each of your projects and start essentially over with your digital organization. How would that sound to you?
Actually, I relaxed when you said that. Like I absolutely relaxed when you said that, because I'm building a course, I'm writing a new book, right? I have this client roster of clients that I try and keep everything together. And I actually, you've saved me with my client notes. I switched to your system for, that's the one thing that is totally organized, and I can find. So that, but starting over and starting fresh, and then not trying to fix the past is a great way to do that. So now talk about some of the tools that you like that people use, because again, there's more to this. Every time I ask Tiago a question, I think about he's already explained it in the book, in a video, and on another podcast. So it's interesting that I kind of jump to that. But for me, the you actually explain each person has a different personality type in how they have to organize their stuff, right? So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I want to stay as high level as I can possibly stay. uh, what tools do you like to use that simplify your life?
Yeah, let's see. In terms of, I mean, productivity apps, there's really the five core ones.
And a
Uh,
lot of us don't know what those are.
sure. So I would really just say an email program. I use Superhuman. A task manager. I use one called,
Let me so superhuman is something that you use instead of Google or Apple or uh, Microsoft Outlook. So why do you use superhuman?
sure. So Superhuman is what's called an email client. It's really just an interface. It's like a different interface that then connects to Gmail. So I still use Gmail like everyone else on the back end. All that's different is the 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 interface that I actually interact with.
And what do you like about superhuman over Apple Mail or Outlook?
Yeah, Superhuman, I've been using it for a few years. It's really just far faster, simpler in many ways, more focus on the direct use case of just processing email as efficiently as possible and then getting out of there. And then it just has a whole range of features that, you think about Gmail. Gmail has several billion users, right? Everything is lowest common denominator. Everything is like, they're not going to do anything unless it can be used by like 500 million people. So that kind of forces them to make decisions that might be good for the lowest common denominator user, but not for me. Right. Like I'm a relatively sophisticated, advanced user. And so there's just little things that you would never even think of that Superhuman offers that Gmail doesn't.
Okay, so all right, so now we upgrade our email client to something that's a little bit more friendly and usable to for the exchanges between systems. What's next?
Yeah, the next most important, I'd say, is my calendar app. I use one, again, an email client or a calendar client. So it's a different interface that connects to Google Calendar on the back end. I use one called BusyCal, one word, which again just kind of is faster, more intuitive, and provides more features than the actually very simplistic, native Google Calendar website.
Nice. And then what else?
Next most important, I'd say, is your task manager. My task manager is my digital to-do list. And I use one, been using it for more than 10 years called Things, which is made by a company called Cultured Code.
Things, Things.
Yep.
Okay. And what does that do for you? Having a instead of having a list that you write down on, instead, how does that help you?
Yeah, let's see. There's a few things. I feel like the single most important feature is the ability to, when you're looking at an email, to capture, to create a task, like what do you actually have to do about this email, while still maintaining and inserting a link back to that original email. Things has a probably the single most important feature of Things is called, I think it's called autofill, I believe is what it's called. And so what it allows me to do is look at an email, do one keyboard command, right? I think I do, what is it? Control space bar, write the task, hit enter, and then I archive the email. And the email's out of my inbox, it's out of sight, but I still have a record of it on my to-do list with a link back to the email if I need to reference it.
So you can start emptying. You don't have to keep everything in your inbox now. That's brilliant, right? Now it's part of that project, and your other pieces are clean and ready to go. Okay, so
Yeah,
now we have that.
this is huge. This is really one of my most popular articles of all time. It's called One Touch to Inbox Zero. It's also a YouTube video that we have that talks about this. It's like people find email overwhelming. They think it's because they get too many emails. It's really not. It's because they're trying to use their email as a public communication system at the same time as a private to-do list. And the result of merging those two things together is it's basically a to-do list that anyone in the whole world who has your email address can add items to without your permission. It's just crazy.
Note to my producer, that's the audiogram right there. That is like the gold. The light bulb just went off on that one. That was really good. Okay, so now what's the next piece that you need?
Yeah, so fourth is your digital notes app. This is the whole, centerpiece of a second brain is essentially a content management system. Everything is content. Things you want to save from emails, websites you want to save, bookmarks, quotes from podcasts, highlights from books, articles that you clip that just we live swimming in a sea of content. We need a personal content management system, but not this like really, rigid formal database, something very quick and lightweight and informal. That's Notes, except we don't want to save it in paper form primarily because it's not searchable and you can lose it and all that. We want to do Notes, the informality of Notes, but in digital form.
So what you're talking about is Notion and Evernote and all the other apps that are kind of like that.
Yep. Yep.
And for me, I've grown up on Evernote. I've had it forever, so all my stuff is in Evernote. It's missing a few key things for me as far as usability, but I have it offline. With Notion, it seems to be more fluid and a little more modern, but you can't have it offline, right? That's the
Yeah.
that's the two. That's kind of the difference right there.
There's all sorts of these trade-offs. That's one of them, online versus offline. And I think what people often miss is that you can't say one or the other is inherently better for everyone, right? Like when I was first getting into knowledge management throughout my 20s, most of my 20s were spent abroad. Were spent in different countries where internet access was not reliable. So in the early years, made the trade-off. Okay, I'm going to go offline, which has clear advantages and disadvantages. So you really have to look at not just your personality and your temperament, but your stage of life. In that stage of life, do you want something simpler or more complex? Something that's more on your desktop computer or something that's more on your mobile device? Something that is, compatible with your organization and all their IT policies and everything, or something that is more about your personal needs? There's all these different spectrums that you have to kind of think about.
So one of the things I think is a success criteria is a desire to actually have this functioning thing going on. So for me, like it hasn't been a 10 to have my content and everything I have organized.
Mhm.
If it was a 10, it would be done. I would spend that 5, 10, 15 minutes a day just making sure things went to where they were and setting things up the way they need to be. And I've just gotten by with the way it's been.
Mhm.
Now for me, it's overwhelming, and now it's a 10. Now it's something I have to do. You wrote your two tweets in the last couple of days that really helped me understand how I can do this imperfectly. One is you likely won't be successful with an off-the-shelf template for productivity. You have to find out what works for you with trial and error. And it was the trial and error piece that really spoke to me is I'm not going to build the perfect second brain. I might not even build a good second brain. I'm going to build one and then I'm going to work with it and I'm going to have to make it a priority to work with it so I can have my stuff. And then the
Yeah.
other tweet you wrote was resisting the urge to create the perfect system will make you have a better system. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, this really speaks to the psychology of this. It's funny because we're talking in engineering, almost technical terms, what software and tools and frameworks, but the constraints are not in the software, right? It's like sometimes people will say, "Oh no, I can't unlock my creative potential until that one feature, that Notion has been promising comes out." What? That's
Typical ADD response.
Yeah, right. That's insane. That's insane. Like, did Leonardo da Vinci 500 years ago, wait until whatever, new kind of paintbrush came out before he expressed his creativity? No, it's ludicrous. All the constraints pretty much are in our psychology. That's where the roadblocks lie. We just project and externalize them onto the external world. And one of the biggest ones is perfectionism. Perfectionism is this very clever strategy that our brain, it's like a trick that it plays on us, which it says, I don't want to take any action or take any risk or face any uncertainty, but let me cover up and justify that lack of action by telling myself that actually I'm trying to do it so well and so perfect. And that is the real reason that I'm waiting. Right? It's like such this clever bait and switch, right? Oh no, you're not afraid. You're just a person of high taste and high standards who is committed to excellence.
Last question. So I listened to this podcast and I've never heard of you before. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. This is so smart. I really need to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to order your book. The second thing I'm going to do is subscribe to your YouTube channel. The third thing, I'm going to sit down at my desk. What would you want me to do if I sat down at my desk and go, I'm just going to start? Where would you want me to start?
I would point you to a specific video that we have, which is a 30-day note-taking experiment. This is how I recommend people start because you know what? You don't even know if all this is right for you. You don't know if note taking is for you. You don't know if a second brain is going to solve the main challenge that you're facing. So just do a 30-day trial, right? It's completely free. There's actually no software that you need to buy or download. Just use whatever's on your device, Apple Notes, Google Keep. You can download Evernote if you want. But it's a 30-day experiment, and I guide you through what that looks like in the video. It's like a 10 or 12-minute video to just see if you can take one note per day. And by the way, my long-term average over like 10 years is just 2 notes per day. So if you
Mhm.
can take one note per day, and when I say a note, it could be one quote, it could be one photograph, one bookmark. If you can take one note a day, you're already at 50% of my performance.
The expert's performance.
And then
I'm going to put the link in the show notes for that because I actually watched that last week and it's so good.
at the end of 30 days, just decide, was this worth it? Was this valuable to me? Likely what you're going to find is some aspects of it or some parts of it were valuable, others weren't. Keep the ones that were valuable, discard the ones that weren't. I always tell people building a second brain it's not an ideology, it's a toolkit. It's not an ideology or a religion where it's like you have to accept it 100% or nothing. It's a toolkit. It's like walking around a hardware store. Certain tools and parts are going to be useful for whatever home renovation project you're doing. Others won't be. Keep and preserve what you like and just ignore what you don't.
Would you say it's also a bit of a practice and
Mm.
kind of a personal culture to just start thinking in this way that you want to take care of the information that you have and the stuff that you're using in order to disseminate it?
Yeah, I would almost think of it's true. It's a mindset, it's a practice, and it's a set of habits. But I would almost think of those things as other kinds of tools, right?
Mhm.
Some tools you pick up is like a software tool, another tool is like a mindset, which is really like a lens that you use to see things a different way. It's like one aisle has software tools, another aisle has in the hardware store has like mental tools.
So what I'm going to do is I'm actually now, because I set this date for myself after you and I talked, I'm going to spend the next 30 days in earnest building and looking at my second brain and creating it. And I'm going to do a solo podcast on my results on what we talked about. Tiago, I'd like to just acknowledge you for two things. One, in your videos, one of the things I notice, and in the way you interact with the world, you're very kind. And that's not something I see a lot in with people who are putting out tons of content and all that. You're very gentle and very kind when you explain all these things, and I really appreciate that
Mm,
because when with ADD, when someone smart starts to suggest these things, I go into meltdown pretty quickly. And
mm.
it like that 30-day challenge is such a gentle way to help someone transition into it. So really
Wow.
nice.
Thank you. Thank you. That means so much.
The
So
second
much.
acknowledgement is I always ask people to dumb down their content for me and for my for my audience. Not because my audience is dumb. My audience is pretty sharp. It's because usually we're not. I'm bringing people in who are different than us, who have different expertise, and most people can't let go of what they wrote, that world, and just talk in human terms. And I appreciate you explaining to this to us in very human terms.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. That's really what I strive to do. Be a
Yeah,
different kind of some of the productivity gurus out there. Oh man. They're like the coach, yelling at you to perform better,
Yeah,
which I
doesn't
don't know.
it just doesn't work.
I'm in the same boat. It doesn't work for me. And I hope, yeah, I hope we can find a kinder, gentler approach to this stuff.
And dude, you have so many groupies who have their own YouTube channels just doing what you teach them. So if people want to find out more about you, I have all the links and everything that are going to be in the show notes, but where would you like them to go to find out more about you?
You can go to buildingasecondbrain.com is the home base for the book, the course that I teach, the podcast, all the many blog post articles. It's really I call it the second brain universe. It's the extended cinematic universe of and people, not just me, by the way, who are creating all this different kind of knowledge management content.
Yeah, it's just the way information comes at us now. It's essential if we want to survive and we actually use it to the best of our ability. So thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
To everybody else, I really appreciate you sticking with me while I stumbled through this particular interview. This one was personal for me because it's just a tough one to keep things organized, and to actually get to talk to Tiago is a privilege. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to figure this out for myself. I'm going to give you the report and tell you what works and what doesn't work for me, because a lot of you are like me. I love you a ton. I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of the day.